Well, I feel we've dived deep enough and covered enough that you can tell me what was most relevant about what we discussed. After everything we've talked about, what does that mean to you about blame and personal responsibility? From Nick Vujicic to your kids, to your parents blaming her parents and daughter blaming, to practice and navigating life. And we're responsible for navigating other people's shit because they are life's curveballs.
All right. So first you said if I blame my parents, then my grandkid can blame her mother, which is my daughter, and my daughter can blame me. And I don't like this. So then he said that some of my kids' stuff, not everything, but some of their stuff is because of my bad parenting choices. So it is my fault for those parenting choices, even though how I react to them and I can change those now.
Yeah, or any decision in the past.
Or any decision.
If you had a bad conversation with someone, why did it go bad? How's your relationship with them? Did you snub them at a party one time? Have you made a poor decision at some point in the past?
Right.
This applies to everything.
Yes.
So,
Okay.
What decisions did we make in the past? Because we're responsible for those decisions.
Right. And so I think that my mother made some poor parenting choices with me, and this led to some of my behavior choices and my mental health issues as well. So I actually think now that even though from the conversation that we both have some blame in the situation, my part was my reaction to her things. My mother was a victim of domestic violence for many years. So she had a lot of stuff and didn't make the best parenting choices. So she's responsible for her choices that she made with me. However, my part of it is I'm supposed to navigate other people's, including my mother's, because she's only a human being. Mothers are only humans. This is something I learned from you recently, and she's not a god, and I don't need to put her on a pedestal. So she has her own stuff, and I navigated her things poorly. So my decisions were not the best either. So I think it's both of our faults. Was she wrong to put me in a mental hospital? Yes and no. No, you can tell me if I'm wrong or not, but I think because she made poor parenting decisions to listen to other people, she didn't trust her gut. These are her. Those things are her fault because it's hers.
But was she taught to trust her gut by her parents?
No, she was not. But so
they made poor parenting decisions, right, and now she can't function.
Right. So
she couldn't parent you properly.
Again. But I still think it's their fault and her fault. So, and I think that my reactions to her are my fault. I didn't have to. And, please remember when I tell you the following, what's coming. I was a teenager. I was only 13 years old and very afraid and confused and hormonal. Throwing remote controls at her, screaming at her, slamming doors at her, calling her names, telling her things like, I don't blame my father for hurting you, and things like this. And that's just tip of the iceberg of the things I said and did.
Yikes. You were quite a handful as a teenager, huh?
Yes. And I think...
Maybe not optimal choices?
No, I think those choices I made in reaction to her parenting, that's my fault. I take full responsibility for those actions and the things I said. I should never have said those things to anyone, let alone my own mother. But her reaction to that, by putting me in a mental hospital, may have been extreme, because she didn't know any better, and again, listened to other people who didn't know better either. Taking advice from priests and people without children is not an ideal way to handle it. So, though you don't have kids and you give excellent parenting advice, so I don't know about that one. But anyway, the point is, I think we both carried equal responsibility for our own things.
That's pretty good. It sounds like you learned a lot and came a long way in our short discussion.
Yeah, I think...
You started out pretty hungry to blame your mom.
Yes.
And you ended it with, I think we both have our own stuff and our equal parts, and we're both responsible for those parts.
Yeah, I think if we both took personal responsibility for each of our parts of it, this would be
healthy.
I would be really healthy. And you know what? It would go a long way for us healing our relationship if we both took personal responsibility. And I am going to call her out a little bit here because she does not. But I know she can. I know she doesn't because she doesn't really understand any of this. She's never taught any of this. She's never...
You didn't take responsibility for you?
No, and I didn't. And I did some, I don't want to say equally horrible, but I did some pretty not great things and said some not nice things to my kids growing up. As most parents lose their cool and, you know, they get annoyed and they say not nice things. And I've apologized since to my kids for those things, but still, I didn't make great parenting choices. So they can blame me for those, and they have every right. But their reaction to our conversations and my actions, they have to take responsibility, because we each one of us, I think now from this, have to take responsibility for our thoughts, our moods, and our choices, because otherwise we're a society that's just blaming everyone else and nobody fixes anything. So, and I know if you're here listening or watching, you're here to fix something, and we resonated with you because we got it and we understand. And so, yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, that's fantastic growth. I love it.
Thanks.
I'm impressed and I'm proud of you. And I hope it feels better to come to this realization. At the same time, personally, I would take it even further.
Okay. Yeah, great.
So your takeaway from this is we all have our own little responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
But in my Nick Vujicic example, he had the worst situation and he could blame God or genetics or his parents or society or anything he wants.
Yes.
But the magic for him came from just dropping all blame or fault talk altogether. The man does not talk about blame or fault. It doesn't exist as a concept for him. It did when he was a teenager. He was all about blame and fault. This is what happens for people. As they grow, they're like immature and they're all about blame and fault.
Yes.
And as they mature and get older and wiser, they become more and more gracious and more graceful and more magnanimous and more generous. And they replace blame and fault with this broader perspective, this holistic perspective for how humanity operates.
Agreed. But I also I'm glad you brought him up again, because in the beginning, when I talked about him, I said he had something that maybe I didn't have, which was acceptance. And I think having acceptance is what brought him to that level. And same for me and anyone else watching, that if we accept, okay, I accept my mother didn't know what she was doing. She was a victim of domestic violence. She made some poor parenting choices and listened to other people. And if I accept this, then that blame kind of goes away, because there's no, from what I understand, what you're saying is these words, those labels are negative. Blame and what was the other word you
fault.
used? Fault.
You used it multiple times.
Yeah, blame and fault. And if you have acceptance, you can start to stop speaking that way. You can see it in a more positive way. Well, all of it is positive.